So this circle, it touches four major monuments in major places. Goes through the center of the Sphinx, the center of Kenkawis, the eastern edge of Khafre, and the southeastern corner of Khufu. So it's 504 ancient cubits. So the circumference of this circle will be 3168 ancient cubits. Okay. Now, if you take the Great Pyramid there, that orange perimeter around the Great Pyramid, that's 3168 Egyptian inches around the outside of the Great Pyramid. And then if you want to take a look at Stonehenge over here, okay, and you take the outside circle there, it's 316.8 feet. So these you can see the connections here. And so the perimeter of a square, the squaring of that circle is also 316.8. And if you square that circle that I discovered at Giza, again, that's going to be 3168 ancient cubits. Okay, so there you got the 3168, the Great Pyramid, Stonehenge, and the circle, the virtual circle that I discovered at Giza. Okay, let's look at the side length then of each one of those squares. Okay, so the side length of Stonehenge is 79.20 feet. The side length of the Great Pyramid is 7,920 inches, and the side length of the holy circle I discovered there in Giza is 792.0 ancient cubits. Well, what's so big about 7920? The diameter of the Earth is 7,920 miles. So they are plainly exhibiting in Stonehenge, in the Great Pyramid, but also in this virtual circle that I discovered, they're recognizing a knowledge of planet Earth. Okay, so I just shared the screen on that. So let's go over here and stop sharing. Okay, so that's an example. That's probably one of my most major discoveries. Now that's a discovery. The Great Pyramid, a lot of people study. Stonehenge, a lot of people study, but I'm suggesting that to discover that virtual circle, because again, that shaft is the center of this 888-foot circle, which is 504 ancient cubits, and it touches the east side of Khafre, the southeast corner of Khufu, the middle of the Sphinx, and the middle of Kenkawi. So plainly, the four major monuments in that area, that circle touches. So that I showed how that circle reveals knowledge of the size of planet Earth. Okay, so that's that's the kind of research that I do on the plateau, and that's part of my claim to fame is just studying what's in Egypt and seeing the ancient revelations that are placed there. So that would probably be something that I could share while we do this, and then I've got several other things that are examples of discoveries I've made that we could show, and just let the discussion go wherever it goes. But those are the I could just display some of those discoveries as we're going along here.
Yeah, definitely. We can go over them. When you say you discovered the circle, which you just showed us there, how was it you came about that discovery?
It's like so many discoveries. It's kind of instinctual. It's partly by being in the game. Like I'm there searching. So you're not going to find something if you're not searching. I am there searching, and I can't remember how I found it. Somehow we had found that circle, and then I found the center of it, and so I've just discovered it. So it's there. I mean, to me, what I just showed is the proof. Now, of course, Egyptologists don't accept that. They if they say anything about what I just showed, usually they would just say nothing and ignore it, because I'm not an Egyptologist and they figure they can safely ignore me. But if they ever did make a comment, it would be that it was chance or coincidence. So they're not accepting this, but I have found this in so many places in so many ways that to me it's undeniable that plainly what's embedded here is ancient knowledge that's equal to present day knowledge. So the question, you get into discussing how is that, how could that be, but that's so, and then another thing I found about that holy shaft, and I have a paper on academia about this. It's for almost all the major monuments at Giza, the Menkaure satellite pyramids, the Tomb of the Birds, the Khufu Causeway, the satellite pyramid of Khufu. For almost all of them, they're almost all exactly 100-foot increments from the holy shaft. In other words, if you measure from the holy shaft to every one of those monuments to a major point on it, it's an even 100 feet. It's 2,300 feet. It's 1,700 feet. It's 1,600 feet. For instance, the Osiris shaft, which is very near the holy shaft that I found, because there's a series of shafts along the Khafre Causeway. It's exactly 200 feet to the Osiris shaft from that shaft. So that's another thing, well, how did they know the foot? Some people say, well, the Egyptians didn't know the foot. Well, and then, the fact that all of these monuments, so many of them, not all of them, but almost every monument there, I just found is an even 100-foot increment in terms of the distance. So I tried to measure from the center of the holy shaft and then to a major part of, like, if we're saying it's, one of the Menkaure satellites, it should be either to the middle or the corner. And because you can cherry pick and jerry rig a little bit, but so that's just another example of showing that holy shaft is a very significant point. It could have had an obelisk there at one time. I don't know, but I just know that it's the center of that circle that I showed you, and it's also connected to most of the monuments.
What do you think the placement of the pyramids means? Like, they've obviously taken some time and effort to sort of plan where they're going to build these pyramids and these artifacts. What does the placement of it
Well,
mean?
the main thing that the Egyptologists will tell you, of course, is they're, nearly perfectly oriented. And I'm not sure that's really true. I mean, because they're not perfectly aligned to north, but that's one thing that's been said of the pyramids. It's more perfectly aligned than the Paris Observatory. It's, perfect. It faces the four cardinal points. So that would be an answer you'd get from Egyptologists and even some pyramidologists. They used to say that a lot. So how could they accurately, like, well, it's really, to me, I've never been, enthralled by that, because I think it's relatively easy to, if you use, just a pole and use the sun and make marks along the ground. It seems to me it's fairly easy to orient things to north. As a matter of fact, I think the distance that it's off of true north, oh, it's so close, it's better aligned than the Paris Observatory. It's only, point. Well, I think it's probably exactly where it's supposed to be. And we've made the mistake of thinking they're pointing it to due north, because you can show that so many of the pyramids point to the pole star. And, as precession moves, the pole star, the place of the pole star changes. So I think it's possible that, the pyramid's pointing exactly where they wanted it. And their goal wasn't to point it to true north. So that's the first level of answer to your question, which is kind of the way the Egyptologists might look at it. But from the way I'm looking at it is, the sacred geometry, which the Egyptologists miss or refuse to see, is obviously there. I mean, it's beyond chance. So the way that the different material objects on the plateau are placed, that there's undeniable knowledge of the existence of especially phi and pi. But the Euler number is there too, and those are all relatively recently known constants, maybe back to the Greeks, but not supposedly as far back as the Egyptians. But it's plainly there. So that would argue then, Aaron, that it argues in the direction of saying there's a single design, there's a unified design at Giza, because Egyptologists basically follow anthropology, they follow general archaeology, and thinking of the ascent of man from a monkey to advancing that way. And so their theory would be, well, when Khufu was the king, he put his pyramid where he wanted to, and then when Khafre was king, he put his pyramid wherever he wanted to, and then and so you wouldn't have a super coordination of the plateau. You'd have the decision of each individual king. And that truly is the history of the world. Genghis Khan did what he wanted to. Hitler did what he wanted to. Napoleon did what he wanted to. The history of the world is strong kings do what they want to do. So I think what we have at Giza is a counter narrative to the major history of the world. We have an example where a bunch of kings obviously were in harmony, because I do think there's a certain truth to the Egyptological assignment of pharaohs to these pyramids. And so when Menkaure was working on his pyramid, he was truly working on his pyramid, but he must have assented to putting his pyramid where this grander design was. He didn't rebel from that. He accepted the larger plan. And so the question becomes then, if there is a unified plan that, like if you take, a strong centralized bureaucracy like the United States, the cemeteries in Arlington are organized in straight rows. You have to be a soldier that died in a war or whatever to be placed in that cemetery. Somebody from that, some poor stoneworker from Akron, Ohio is not going to be buried there. That's an example of a very organized, heavily bureaucratic, centralized government. So you have to have some kind of explanation like that to explain the unified plan of Giza. But, who was the architect that was revered enough that we'd say, okay, we're going to follow his design? Because, what's the chances you're going to get former President Trump and current President Biden working together on an overall plan for something? It's probably not going to happen. So, listen, we haven't started yet, have we?
Yeah, I think we went straight into it.
I thought we were just kind of warming up and to go into what we were going to do, but it's fine. It's fine. I don't care. So let's keep rolling.
Well, I've got a bit of I've got a question around current Egyptologists and sort of the information you're presenting. What, in your experience, why do you think they find it so hard to accept that there could be alternative theories to why these pyramids have been made?
Well, I think that every academic discipline, anthropology, sociology, political science, economics, every discipline, especially one that's is not totally based in physics, like physics or chemistry. I think every major discipline suffers from the kind of things that Thomas Kuhn talked about in the structure of scientific revolutions, that they don't really take place through science. It's not really the advancement of science. There's other sociological factors and power factors that figure in. And so if you study the beginning of Egyptology in the 19th century, Flinders Petrie is often called the father of Egyptology. There are certain ruts that were built in from the beginning that are probably wrong. But because of the conservative nature of human institutions and disciplines like this, those errors become just part of the fabric of the discipline and almost impossible to change later. And so if you're going to get a PhD, just speaking very practically, if you're going to get a PhD in an American university, like Zahi Hawass did, like Mark Lehner did, if you're going to get a PhD, you're going to have to pretty much go along with some things that are entrenched in that discipline, or you're not going to get your PhD. And so that's the first thing I'd say, is that their livelihood depends on adhering to a party line. But for most of them, they had to buy into that a long time ago. It's not like they're thinking, oh, I really believe that Larry's got something here, but I can't say it because I'll lose my job. I don't really think that goes on. I think that they were bought off a long time ago to just believe that those things can't be there. Or they're so entrenched in, the anthropological thinking of just being purely Darwinian based or something, that the Egyptian society hadn't advanced far enough. They didn't even have the wheel supposedly or whatever. Then you're simply, not going to believe it. So I think, to me, it's obvious that it's there. I mean, I don't even care if I even had a PhD from, the University of Pennsylvania or wherever. It's like, it's obviously there. And there probably are a handful of Egyptologists that, that do believe these things. I'm sure there are. I know there are, but they're just not, they don't control the mainstream.
Right. Yeah. I understand what you're saying as well about it's like from a young age you're taught 1 + 1 is 2. So that's the fundamentals of your learning. So these
Yeah.
guys have had fundamentals of their learning.
Like people say to me all the time, because I talk about revelations from meters in the Great Pyramid. Oh, they didn't know, meters. So all the time you get that from people. They didn't know meters. And so it's like, okay, Wikipedia says they didn't know meters. Your 8th grade teacher taught you they didn't know meters. Your high school teacher taught you that. But is it true? It's plain that they knew meters. So that just, to me, once I learned that, that just threw off all the stuff that I had learned about that. I'm not throwing out my whole education. I'm just throwing out the part where he said, well, they didn't know the meter, because the French invented the meter in 1798 when, they took the 1/10 millionth part of the quadrant from the pole to the equator through Paris. So the 1/10 millionth part of that was the meter. Well, since that's an Earth commensurate unit, the meter is related to the Earth. All ancient measures are related to the Earth, the cubit, the meter, and the foot. And the metrologists, I have a whole library here of the metrologists, John Michel, Harry Sievertson, John Neal. These are men who study these things. It was a discovery of the metrologists that all ancient systems of measure, and I mean all, Chinese, Sumerian, Greek, Roman, British, all of them are connected. The British system goes way back before the British. We just use that name because it was widely used in the British Empire. I watched a video yesterday by Alan Green showing that the foot is probably the aboriginal measure. And the foot, the cubit, and the meter are related to the Earth. So they're, in a sense, they're ontological, they're built into nature, and they're fundamental, and they were, to the extent that they were derived by humans, they were derived by humans studying the Earth, and they were already built into the Earth. So really, the cubit, meter, and the foot. So anyway, so since I know all that and believe it, and I know it's absolutely true, well, someone else who's learned all their life, well, the meter wasn't invented until the French in 1798. That's going to come as a huge clash. And so if those people aren't willing to look at the sources I've looked at, I mean, basically, Alan Green and Robert Grant have reasoned from creation, from from numbers themselves and from the measurements in the Great Pyramid. Alan Green has a whole video where he shows the measurements of the Great Pyramid yield, the cubit, meter, and the foot. But the metrologists haven't reasoned sort of from the ground up the way Robert Grant and Alan Green did. The metrologists have simply studied the measurements that exist in the world. And so you would expect if the Egyptian measure, the Chinese measures were developed independently from Sumerian measures, were developed independently from the British, then there would be no connection between them. People in China developed their length. The Sumerians developed their cubit. And it was found that they're all related to each other through even integer ratios. Two of the biggest ones are 440 to 441 and 176 to 175. There's also 6 to 7, 24 to 25. And it's unbelievable when you see it that all these systems of measure are related, which argues for it argues for one thing, because any effect, all ancient systems of measure are related. Any effect has to have an adequate cause. If all ancient systems of measure are connected, what's the cause? And it seems impossible to not believe there was a single aboriginal system of measure that then worked its way in to different societies. So the king didn't decide this is how long a cubit is. No, that didn't happen anywhere. The king's foot was this long. That's a foot. No. We say that, we teach that in 5th grade, but that's not what happened. Every society inherited. Why do we have scales at the Supreme Court? Because measure is sacred. A pound has to be a pound everywhere. An ounce has to be an ounce. Measure has always been sacred. And so the sacred measures were passed down, especially through the sages. And so even when times when there was civilizations fell and stuff, there were still a few anointed scribes and sages that these numbers were kept. That to me is the only explanation that could explain how all, and I've done programs about this, but all ancient systems of measure are connected. Now, if you don't accept that conclusion, that then you know, you don't have to reason through to how did it happen, because you're not accepting that it's true. I'm simply saying it is, and there's no question that it is. You know, the ones that do the Earth measure, the guy from Oxford, Tom Alexander Tom, the Heath, Robin Heath, Richard Heath, John Michel. They are the ones that looked at all these stone monuments, you know, around the world. You know, Baalbek, you know, Stonehenge, Woodhenge, you know, the Great Pyramid, and they show this unbelievable, well, knowledge of each other. Like somehow they had a GPS where they all knew where the other ones were, but they also show they understood the size of the Earth, and as I found many places recently, the speed of light. So these different, so the question's been raised by them for a long time, really. Well, how do you explain that they knew the size of planet Earth long before it was supposedly discovered? How did they know the speed of light long before it was supposedly discovered by, you know, Einstein, Michelson, Morley, you know, the whole thing? And so it really begs for a different explanation of human origins that has been as largely, you know, entertained. It calls for some different kind of explanation. You've got to explain. So a very common way for esoteric people is to say, well, it's Atlantis. It's some previous high-tech civilization that was there and is not there now. You know, but where's the evidence other than these monuments exist with these measures in them? So it's really interesting, and it's surprising that it's not looked at more, debated more, considered more.
Yeah, it's especially fascinating. Well, what you've obviously just gone over with the measurement side of things. If everyone has similarities within measurements, then
yeah, because that knowledge must have stemmed from some developed society where they had the ability to calculate a measurement based on what the Earth's sort of circumference is. The circumference of the Earth. That's right.
Well, it was the radius, but
Radius.
the other elements are also, you know, there too in different ways. The circumference, those are all there too. The 7920 is the diameter, but the circumference is also known. And there's evidence that they knew the different, the difference between the polar radius and the equatorial radius, because there's a bulge, you know, because of the outward spinning, and so they understood the differences between those measures. They understood in their own way that we live on an oblate spheroid, you know, not a globe. So yes, but you know, I'm not sure that that's the only explanation, though, Aaron. You just said a highly advanced civilization. That would make sense. That would be one rational explanation. But another would be through revelation. You know, through because if you take because I think that the common source of measure is Enoch. You know, Enoch is a historical person. You know, he's mentioned in the Bible. He's one of the patriarchs listed in the Old Testament. But there are a lot of ancient books. If you take Jason Bershears from the Archaics YouTube channel, you know, Jason was in prison in Texas, and he doesn't hide that. But during there, he got access to all kinds of ancient books. And so he sometimes boasts he doesn't do research on the internet like everybody else. He does his research from ancient. And he writes a lot about the life of Enoch and things that Enoch knew and things that Enoch did. So I'm taking Enoch to be a historical person, the same as Julius Caesar or Donald Trump. Okay, so Enoch, his name is Inch, because anciently there are no vowels in many languages. There's no vowels. So Inch is NCH, and Enoch is NCH. And so the unit that's used in many different systems of measurement, called an inch, goes back to its founder. And so Enoch is also related to the mythological Thoth, Hermes, and Mercury. You know, the Greek, the Roman, and the Egyptian gods of measure, the gods who started language and writing. You know, and Shishat was the female, you know, cohort. So where did those come from? You know, the myth of Hermes, the myth of Mercury. You know, they came from the real man Enoch. They're the mythical representation of Enoch. So Enoch was, it says in the Bible, in the Old Testament, it says he walked with God and then he was taken. So most people think he was taken to heaven. He never died. You know, you could argue about whether that's historical or not, but that's what the record says. So the point is, the other way, Aaron, besides there being a large civilization that quantified measures, and, you know, just like there was a quest for a while to make the U.S. go metric. Well, that would mean our Congress would have to pass the law that means the U.S. would go metric. That would be an example of what you're talking about. It's an organized society setting things, but that never happened. The U.S. never embraced the metric system, so we kept, you know, the British system. All right. So that's one explanation for measure. But another explanation is a man highly anointed, in touch in a previous age where there was a golden age and God and man were closer and people lived at the spirit level more than we do now in our mundane society, that they got the revelation of these and then passed them along. And that would be another explanation. Because, you know, if you believe that God is the creator and then he created the earth of this, like, then the measurements that come from the earth are related to the earth, the cubit, the meter, and the foot. You know, if you swing a 1 meter pendulum, so take a 1 meter pendulum and swing it at 30 degrees. First of all, it swings out exactly 1 second. It swings a 30 degree in 1 second. So now you've got time and measure related, relativity. But it swings out exactly 1 royal cubit. The 30 degrees, which is, you know, pi over 6. And then that also happens to be 1.718 feet, which is Euler minus 1. The Euler number is 2.718. And so 1.718, which is the length of the cubit that's there, is Euler minus 1, which is a famous number, is a famous constant used now. So both the foot, the meter, and the cubit are aboriginal, but they're connected to the earth. And so, you know, if God revealed that to Enoch, or if Enoch somehow knew it, now that's in the knowledge base of the world without an advanced civilization encoding it. It started from a golden age when God and man were closer, and then it was revealed to those early people who, when they organized civilizations, already had that knowledge. And that's why all ancient systems of measure are connected. Because of the aboriginal beginning, not because the central power of those civilizations coordinated with each other. The units that they started with, the measuring systems that they each started with from scratch, were there from the beginning because they go back to Enoch, a single aboriginal source. Now, people might not like that explanation, but to me, it's the most rational and explains all the evidence. And you know, so.
Well, when you say people might not like that explanation, for example, with archaeologists, how would they explain there being similarities?
Well, the reason they wouldn't like it, neither side would like it, because, you know, the two major sides being the mainstream, archaeology and Egyptology that exists today, and then the alternatives, who like maybe Grant Hancock, you know, Robert Bauval, you know, Robert Grant, Alan Green. So those are the kind of two major camps. Well, they wouldn't like it because it doesn't feed into the narrative of of Atlantis, you know, a previous civilization that we don't know about now. Enoch we know about. Again, Jason Breshears, there's a lot of ancient things written besides just the Bible, written about Enoch, the book of Jasher, you know, the book of Enoch, different books. Okay, but what do we know about Atlantis? Did they have telephones? Did they have atomic reactors? What colors did they tend to like? How did they organize the cars that they had? Or did they have cars? Because if they were advanced and they didn't have those things, well, what are we saying they're advanced about? You know, you can have a kid that grows up in the ghetto in India and he understands advanced physics because he can read physics books. So you can have one person knows a bunch of stuff. It doesn't mean that they have atomic weapons. It doesn't mean that they have, you know, cars or jets or drones. So the point I'm making is we don't know anything about Atlantis hardly. You know, it's shrouded in myth. So if we're going to attribute to Atlantis all this stuff, we're attributing something to something that we really know anything about. but we become invested in that. So if it's not Atlantis, it's something else. So that's what the alternatives, it doesn't fit their narrative, but obviously it doesn't fit the Egyptologists and the archaeologists because they're, bound by Darwinian thinking, which to me has been so disproved. I mean, even the people who are evolutionary philosophers today recognize that survival of the fittest and natural selection are not testable concepts. They're tautologies, and they can't really be tested. So the whole edifice of evolutionary thinking that's been arises on a foundation that's fallen. And so even the leading philosophers who consider themselves evolutionists don't accept Darwin or the survival of the fittest or natural selection. And to me, all that we're finding out with the science of probability and the amazing complexity of DNA, organic compounds, there's no way that by mutations, there's not enough time. There becomes a practical, you can say, well, it used to be time saved us from everything. It used to be that they first said, well, maybe the Earth was 1 million years old. No, maybe it's 25 million. Maybe it's 1 billion. It just getting farther and farther. And so you think, we can, no, if you take the smallest thing we know of, an electron, the biggest thing we know of the universe, some calculations say there's 10 to the 80th. In other words, 10 to the 80th. That's all. That number takes the smallest thing and the biggest thing, and that's the number of electrons in the universe. So the point is, you can't just keep extrapolating back and think that we'll eventually get there by chance. No, you won't. No, you won't. With the modern science of probability, I would say it's a scientific fact that evolution is impossible. So that kind of thinking pushes me to a creator. I often talk about the alpha and omega because, like Robert Grant, I discovered an alpha and omega in the Great Pyramid. And that is that's a fascinating story too, because there's Eckhart Schmitz wrote a book about the Great Pyramid, and he talks about the scored lines. The scored lines are in the descending passage. The original entrance is outside the pyramid, and then it leads to the descending passage. Well, a short ways in is where the scored lines are. The ancient writers of the pyramid always talked about the scored lines. It's not as well known today, but there are scored lines in that passage. And so Eckhart Schmidt says that the placement of those scored lines is, you've got to it's complicated, but he says it's the three body problem of when you got three bodies like the sun, the moon, and the earth. It was the three body problem was figuring out the gravity of them and where the where the lack of stress points were. And so so Leonard Euler solved the three body problem and shows that in a system of the sun, the earth, and the moon, there are 5 Lagrange points. And those Lagrange points are where there's almost no gravitational force. That's where you'd want to shoot a satellite if you're going to shoot a satellite over, because it would be affected least by winds and things, and it would be it's called the sweet spot. And of those 5 Lagrange points, there are only 2 of them that really would require very little adjustment from Earth. Okay. So he says that those scored lines are associated with that concept. Now, you'd have to read his advanced, but just take that as a possibility, okay? The alpha and omega I discovered is right next to the scored line, and the shapes inside that alpha and omega, because it's more than an alpha and omega, look exactly like the diagram of the sweet spot in the three body problem and the Lagrange points. So it's Leonard Euler discovered the solution to the three body problem, in 17 whatever. And here I'm saying that scratched next to the scored line is an ancient symbol, an alpha and omega, that's saying, hey, we knew about the three body problem and we got to figure it out right here. Okay, so it's just another example of all the things I'm talking about. The holy circle that I found there that shows the dimensions of planet Earth. The Aboriginal, the worldwide, use of a system of measure that's really one system of measure. The alpha and omega I discovered, and Eckhart Schmidt saying it's the three body problem solved. So it goes on and on.
Does the shape of the pyramid itself sort of justify what you're saying as well, because you can find pyramids obviously in Egypt, Mexico, Cambodia, Indonesia. There's all these massive structures that are shaped like a pyramid all around the world.
Yeah. Well, Robert Grant has just said that all the pyramids in Egypt are constructed on ratios because they're built on triangles, and triangles have ratios like 5 to 8. And he shows that the whole musical scale, the quarter tone scale, is the pyramids are all, major chords. That the ratios are the same ratios, as music. So that's one explanation for pyramids. But the Egyptian explanation for the pyramids is that the original Ben was a pyramid. It was a top stone, but and it was supposedly all made out of meteoric iron, and it was on the obelisk at Heliopolis. And so there's this holy teaching about this Ben, this pyramid that's the top of the obelisk, and it's associated with the Bennu bird, which is associated with the phoenix, which is associated with resurrection, and it's also associated with the Zep Tepi, which is the first time, the creation. So they say that, out of the earth, the primordial mound came, which is what Genesis 1 says. In Genesis 1, another account of creation, it says, let the dry land appear. So the water's already there. And then it says, let the dry land appear. That's in creation. So the Egyptian Zep Tepi is the same thing. You've got the land arising out of the water, the primordial water, and the land is in the shape of a pyramid. So all the pyramids go back to saying the teaching about the creation, and it's the original arising of Zep Tepi. So to me, all the pyramids, in a sense, a worship or an honoring of the creator. And the most recent video I put out, I think it's one of the most recent, is probably one of my most major discoveries besides the Holy Circle. And it's that I found that they indicated a massive triangle to cover all of Egypt. There's this massive triangle that covers all of Egypt, and it's like the logo of Egypt. So it's like saying, yes, triangles are important, because when the Nile flooded, which it did every year until, they built the Aswan Dam. Well, when it receded, you didn't know where your land was. Hey, that's my property. No, it's not. They had to measure it. They had to take the transit and go out there and resurvey it. And they used triangles. The same thing George Washington did. As a 19-year-old, he surveyed all of Virginia. And so they would survey, and then, okay, here's your property. And they would do it every year. So a triangle is the basis of measurement. It's the basis of, musical scales. It's the Ben. And so the fact that they left this major triangle, and the way I found the triangle is from the unfinished obelisk, this mysterious obelisk that never made it out of the quarry in Aswan, and the mysterious staircase that's up in Abu Ruwash, which is just one of the mysteries of Egypt. And I showed that they both point. So one's in, northeast part of Egypt, one's in the southeast part of Egypt, and they both point to the southwest part of Egypt, which in 2007, 2008, it wasn't found until 2008. There's a major meteoric crater, one of the largest in the world, called the Camille Crater. And even with all the modern technology we have, the fastest we could get an expedition out there of the best four-wheel drive vehicles available was about a week. So here's these two major monuments pointing to the Camille Crater, making this massive triangle over Egypt. And what's interesting is the mysterious staircase is at 26 degrees, which is the angle of the Grand Gallery in the King's Chamber. It's the angle that Robert Temple, who was a major student of Egypt and wrote the book about the Sphinx, he and his wife wrote about the Sphinx mystery. He said the 26-degree angle is the golden angle. And he said at the bottom of a 26-degree rise, there's always going to be something very precious. Well, if you take the 26-degree angle of the mysterious staircase that's up in Iraq and take it up over southwest Egypt, it comes right down on the Camille Crater, where the meteoric iron is, and meteoric iron was worth more than gold in ancient Egypt. As a matter of fact, the Egyptian word for heaven is the same as the word for meteoric iron. And when the Pharaoh rose to heaven, he was considered to take on iron. So you've got God and heaven associated with meteoric iron, and here's this huge crater in southwest Egypt. Oh, that we only just discovered, except I found these ancient monuments pointing right to it. So, maybe you want to look at that visually. Let me see if I can share a screen. Let's just look at that real quick. If I've got it here, can you see that big triangle? Okay, so up here in the north is Abu Wash, the mysterious staircase, and it's at this angle. So the Egyptologists say, well, it's a Roman well. Well, trust me, it's not a Roman well. I know about Roman wells. It's not a Roman well. And it's angled like this. It's 62 degrees. Why? If it's a well, it doesn't have to be angled at 62 degrees. Why didn't they make it straight north and south? That staircase, and let's just look at a picture of it. Probably, well, this is my opening screen for this PowerPoint. Okay, the largest mystery from Egyptian sages, the unfinished obelisk finished. So there's the unfinished obelisk, the largest obelisk ever built in Egypt, but was never raised. And I show that major mark that's in it points exactly to the unfinished, up to the mysterious staircase. So here's the mysterious staircase. I've been there. It's an incredibly scary, intriguing cut into the desert in Egypt. And so I'm saying those two monuments, which are both so incredible and mysterious, they point this. As a matter of fact, let me go back, and let's go a few screens back and show it here. Let's start from here, okay? Let's look at this, okay? So there's the unfinished obelisk on Google Earth, and you can see I drew the green lines on there, okay? So that line right there points to the Camille crater. Okay, and I'm showing you where that is. That is a plane vertice. I've been there and measured it. That's a vertice. The angle changes there. And down over there, here's a close-up. There's a major, you don't see any obelisk that has this, but on this obelisk, there's that point right there. So the line that I'm drawing, that's obviously a special spot. Okay, so there's the line that points to the Camille crater from a plane vertice through a very special spot there, okay? And so what we have here, and what I've been telling you is, so that points, the unfinished obelisk points up to the mysterious staircase. And the mysterious staircase points down, it's at a 62-degree angle, it points all the way across Egypt to the Camille crater. And then the unfinished obelisk, I just showed you the line on it that points to the Camille crater. So I often said that the unfinished obelisk, if you look at the markings on the top of it, it doesn't have markings like any other obelisk. Look at the obelisk in London. That came from Egypt. Look at the obelisk in St. Peter's Square. That came from Egypt. Look at the obelisk in New York City. That came from Egypt. Look at all the Egyptian obelisks. They all have hieroglyphics on them. This one doesn't. The unfinished obelisk has special markings. I followed it, and look, this is what you get. Okay, so you got meteoric iron equals heaven. Okay, that's plainly what it means to ancient. This incredible triangle covers the bulk of Egypt. It's what I called at the beginning of the presentation the largest mystery from Egyptian sages. There it is right there. It's the logo of Egypt. And what does it say? The mysterious staircase points to heaven. The unfinished obelisk has got the Ben, which is a symbol of creation and a symbol of heaven. And what's the meteoric iron? It's a symbol of heaven. This triangle is saying not only did we use triangles all over the place in Egypt, not only did we use pyramids, which are based on triangles, but we also are saying we know something about God. Why are we so interested in mummification? Why are we so interested in the next life? Because we believe in God. So that's what that logo says. It doesn't just show a triangle. It shows a triangle, every vertice of which is saying God in heaven, staircase to heaven. So that to me, that's, I held off, sharing that for a long time. The first place I revealed it was Robert Grant hired me to be the main teacher on his Alpha Chi Omega tour last March, little under a year ago. And so on the cruise ship, when I gave one of my lectures, I did reveal that. That's the first time I revealed it because I knew it was a small group of people. And then on my cruise, I also revealed it to some of the people that came with me to Egypt. So I had revealed it to two small groups, but I always hesitated on sharing it on a wider audience for this reason. because I see how powerful it is. And I thought if I present it in a way that I'll just say, oh, that's interesting, and it'll get put off. I thought I don't want to really publish this till I can somehow make an impact with how powerful this is. Apart from me, it's like, I'm not, so I get more fame or something. My YouTube channel is very small. I've got a pretty big Instagram following, but I just thought, and so I went ahead and I put it on YouTube, and I did all I could to have an instant premiere, and tried to get as many people as I could. And, so I'm going to probably say it still fell limp or whatever. But to me, that is a major, because it's saying that they were putting this there. Because look, here's all the different sides we're talking about. You got the Egyptologists, and you got disagreements among Egyptologists. Then you got people that say it's Atlantis. You got Robert Grant over here. You got the people that are pyramidologists. You got the people that say it's a flat earth. So you got a lot of different voices. Okay, so how can we filter out? Because you have the same thing in Egypt. These Egyptologists disagree with each other about interpretations. As a matter of fact, I've presented at 2 major Egyptological conferences. I presented in 2019 and 2020 because I submitted a paper that was peer reviewed. They had no idea I wasn't an Egyptologist. They were probably really scared once I got accepted, because it's blind peer review. They don't know who the presenter is. They just accept it on its merit. So I presented about some of my findings in Egypt. And so now I'm with a group of people I'm not normally with. I'm with Egyptologists. Almost everybody at this conference is an Egyptologist. And so I kind of learned from them. And one of the things I learned is some of the disagreements that they have. And there was one presentation that was about the Egyptian concept of Ma'at. The goddess Ma'at with her wings. She's the one. Ma'at means order. It means justice. It means we want our society to work. Every pharaoh wanted Ma'at, order, justice in his society. Well, one presentation was talking about rethinking Ma'at, because Ma'at is supposedly, here's the pharaoh stepping on his enemy, crushing his enemies. There's a bunch of chains on his enemies. And the rethinking was, is that really order and justice when you're killing other human beings? When you're subjecting other people and you're putting them in chains? That's Ma'at? I thought Ma'at was order, harmony. So again, here among Egyptologists, there's a rethinking of a major Egyptological concept, Ma'at. Okay. So, and there was a presentation about the 18th dynasty. So that's the dynasty that includes, Hatshepsut, and Ahmose was the father. You've got Amenhotep III, Akhenaten. That's the 18th dynasty. Well, it was plain that there's a whole bunch of disagreements about the chronology. So Egyptologists all disagree about the exact chronology. Now, to the outside world, they always present this front like we're all agreed. We're all agreed, but they're not all agreed. They fight among themselves. So what I'm saying is this: amidst all these voices of different competing views, I just showed you a triangle that's saying, let the Egyptian sages put a motif, an interpretive motif, over Egypt. And it's a triangle, which Robert Grant says, is the basis to the universe. It's geometry, and all the pyramids are based on triangles. And they use triangulation to reset the land every year after the flooding of the Nile. So it's a major symbol, but it's also associated with God and heaven. So in other words, anybody that's interpreting ancient Egypt, oh, they were doing drugs. Oh, look, here's evidence they were doing. That triangle doesn't say anything about using drugs. Okay. No, it was about the Akhenaten's religion. It was about this. Well, there's nothing about the sun in what I just showed there, because he was the solar rays and all this. So all I'm saying is that what I found there, to me, helps set at least one interpretive lens for how to interpret the stuff that comes out of Egypt. They were very serious about making it to the next life, and they were serious about pyramids helping do that.
So what kind of not feedback, what kind of reception have you had from the Egyptologists about your discovery?
Well, it's I traveled in Egypt in 2014 and 2015 with Zahi Hawass, who's like the face of Egypt, and he's the the symbol of the mainstream. And he liked me at the time, but we're in different camps now. But and then I've run into Mark Lehner on the plateau because I've done a lot of research there. And I've talked with Mark. We had our picture taken together last time we were out there about a year ago, and I've corresponded with him a little bit. but we're in completely different camps, and they couldn't be seen publicly to acknowledge anything that I've done. Here's another thing I learned at these Egyptological conferences I presented at. In 2020, there was talk about a return to Giza, a return to Giza. Well, what do you mean return? John Romer, the Australian Egyptologist, chastises the entire Egyptological profession because he says, why am I the first Egyptologist in 100 years to write a serious book about the Great Pyramid? You know, he's more or less saying those coffee table books that Zahi Hawass and Mark Lehner write, those are just pretty books with a bunch of stuff. I wrote a serious study. Why has nobody else done it? Here's why. Because the Egyptologists, in deciding, pursuing their careers, they know if they get associated with Giza, there's a whole bunch of crazy people at Giza, like me, you know, like Graham Hancock, who's been banned from Egypt, you know, these crazy people. And so we can't have that. So I can't be found studying stuff at Giza. I'll look like one of those kooks. So I'm going to go study, you know, at Heliopolis. I'm going to study at Dashur. I'm going to study down in Aswan. I'm going to go to Elephantine Island. And so there's almost nothing from Egyptologists except for Mark Lehner. Mark Lehner spent his life on the Giza Plateau. Other than Mark Lehner's work, there's almost nothing coming out of Giza. So that's that they just stay away. But again, what I heard in 2020 is return to Giza. And sure enough, when I was there this past time, there's actually 2 excavations going on in Giza. And that's like one of the first times I've ever seen that. So the glimpses that I heard in 2020 of, hey, maybe we should start taking over our ground and start going to Giza and study things. And so, you know, it is happening. There is a beginning. And Mark Lehner is even doing research on a tomb, the kind of research he hasn't done before. He studied, you know, about the people, the barracks and the breweries that the builders worked in. And he's tended to do that kind of work. But now he's actually moved up to a tomb. And so anyways, so, you know, I think, you know, I know from, I won't mention names, but from some Egyptologists I know that are in antiquities, that there is a growing sector, especially of younger Egyptologists, that are starting to look at these things. And this man, who I won't say his name, who's pretty highly placed, has told me he respects my research. Now, he'd never say that publicly, but he's told me that. And so I think that we might be coming to as happens in you know, Thomas Kuhn, the nature of, you know, scientific revolutions. I think we may be in the fringes of the cusp of different worldviews starting to come together, and maybe we'll see a new sorting out. I do think there'll be a new sorting out that'll be much more open to the kind of thing that I'm doing.
How long do you think that process would take for ideas to
Well, okay, I based on something that I cannot talk about the names, it's gonna start happening real soon. And with the thing that I'm referring to that I can't talk about right now, with the specific thing I'm talking about, and I'll just say it could be, well, I don't want to say anymore, but okay, that will create the scenario for the meeting of the immovable force and the unmoving object, you know, that the classic clash that leads to, you know, friction or revolution. In other words, I think we're going to start seeing the beginning, you know, because you know, when a new paradigm comes in, okay, let's just say Kepler, you know, the planets move in you know, ellipses, not circles. Oh, that can't be right. Oh, that can't be right. Oh, that can't be right. Oh, maybe that's right. Oh, yeah. And pretty soon, oh yeah, of course that's right. You know, it just takes a while, but it happens. And I think that battle is about to take place. And you know, the battle can go the other way, because take the case of Immanuel Velikovsky. Just do a search for Immanuel Velikovsky. He wrote Earth in Upheaval and Ages in Chaos in 1950. And Harlow Shapley from Harvard, representing the combined muscle of the scientific establishment, tried to have Velikovsky's books not published. He went to Doubleday and tried to stop, not because he had defeated the thoughts of Velikovsky in a rational scientific debate. No, because he had the power of the textbooks, the power of the profession. And just long story short, Velikovsky lost. the brilliant finds of Immanuel Velikovsky, which would have revolutionized Egyptology with all the mistakes it made in the beginning, which are now hardened as ruts into Egyptology as a science. He showed where there was at least 600 years off between traditional chronology and Egyptian chronology. He showed that the planets had electromagnetic effects, which everything was gravity at that point. He showed that there was a flyby of the planet Venus. And oh, he's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. Now all astrophysicists believe that. So anyways, the point is, when Velikovsky, there were, if you study it out, people were in the end when there was the battling, and a bunch of professors went with Velikovsky and a bunch didn't. Long story short, all the professors that went with Velikovsky were fired. Just read it, and you don't hear Velikovsky's name. But all the things you read since, he was right in everything he said. So it's possible that this beginning battle that I said we're going to see, it could play out either way, but we're going to see, you're going to see, who's going to win, truth or the power. Because the thing I'm thinking of is a combination where one of the alternative researchers and one of the Egyptologists is going to collaborate on something. And when they do, that's going to push going to come to shove, and we're going to see where things will move then.
Yeah, it's when you look at it that way, it's sort of inevitable that it will happen because humans are curious minds. So as time progresses, people that are latching onto the sort of scripts that they've been latching onto for however many years, sooner or later, someone's going to want to push the boat out a little bit more and say, let's actually give these guys like a little bit more time. Someone's bound to come across with a little bit more of an open mind and just allow a little bit more of it in. And then over time, someone else will come with and let us slightly more of it in. And then it will come to a point where it seems like we're going to now, where someone's just going to be like, right, let's fully immerse what's going on.
Well, you'd hope that. At the same time, you can see where, a bunch of national muscle was put into saying that you had to take vaccines and talking about the efficacy of vaccines. And then there's a bunch of evidence that's come out, but been suppressed in many ways, that says that, masks didn't help and things like that. And so, one of the factors in this scenario you just talked about, Cam, is that sometimes irrational but powerful central governments can put people behind bars that try and push the envelope too far. So that's just another factor to think about. You've got the intellectual sides fighting, but the intellectual fighting is taking place underneath a governmental umbrella of some kind. And so I'm just saying there's a couple moving parts in that scenario, and you ultimately have to have a friendly government because, the Enlightenment was built on, they rethought everything. And so including government. So John Locke, was the enlightened philosopher that Thomas Jefferson followed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, among these life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And to secure these ends, governments are instituted among men. So Locke and Jefferson both said the purpose of government is to protect rights. That was an Enlightenment idea. Kings shouldn't do it. The Catholic Church shouldn't do it. The Enlightenment said, let's put everything to reason. Forget about all this superstition from the past, all this religious oppression. Let's forget about that. And so that finding of the Enlightenment, building a government that's, from thinking about it, it should be protecting the rights. That's before you do the plumbing, before you make people's streets, before you do all the things the government should do, make sure you protect people's rights. That's largely been lost. We're moving backwards now. We're in a dark age. The idea of governments protecting rights is almost gone from the earth. It's fading. So it's best to have the Enlightenment kind of government for the kind of intellectual debates having full freedom, so both sides can say whatever they want, protected by a government that believes its purpose is to protect rights. But that's fading from the earth. So besides having the right side and having, as you talked about, Cam, the intellectual curiosity that humans have always had, that's why oppressive governments are so evil, because it prevents people from doing what they want to do, which is be curious and discover things and have freedom discover that the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness should be the birthright of everybody. But unfortunately, in most of the history of the world, it hasn't been. It's been the king's whim that gives the bottom line. So So yes, I don't mean to turn this political, but I'm saying that in this revolution that could take place, there's that other factor involved.
Yeah, a bit. That's quite a big factor as well, which you can see
Yes, it
playing
is.
out
Yeah,
today with a lot of
yeah,
things in
yeah,
society.
yeah, yeah.
But whilst you've kind of mentioned government as well, it's kind of off point. But why does the dollar bill have a pyramid on it?
Well, I once, a long time ago, I'll bet it was 50 years ago. I'm an old guy that I was in Washington, D.C., and I thought I'm going to go to the Smithsonian and see what I can find out about that, that picture of the pyramid. And I really felt I can't even remember exactly what it was. I remember I was in the Smithsonian, I was studying that out, and I came to the conclusion. So I can only give you memory now from 50 years ago, because it was literally 50 years ago or 40, it was between 45 and 50 years ago, that it really was the Great Pyramid. That I discovered that they said in the writings that were there about the Great Seal and its obverse, that was a picture of the Great Pyramid. So it doesn't necessarily look like the Great Pyramid, but that's what it said. So I know that I found something when I was trying to get to the bottom of it in the Smithsonian that said that. Now, Robert Grant has made a lot about his recent trip to Egypt, where he went up to the satellite pyramid of Djedefre. The Djedefre pyramid up in Abu Roash is the northernmost pyramid in Egypt. It's not too far from that mysterious staircase. And the satellite pyramid is at the angle 87 degrees. Let's see, it's 78 degrees, I think. Now I'm forgetting, but I checked the angle when I was up there. It's the angle of that pyramid that's on the dollar bill. So and that's the same size triangle that's on the Philosopher's Stone. So there does seem to be something to that shape and an ancient, because in the Great Seal there, in Roman numerals it gives 1776, but 1776 wasn't the founding of our country. That was when the Declaration of Independence was written. But it's not the founding of our country. Why is that number 1776 on that seal? Well, that's when the Illuminati was founded. So I think that you've got this revelation that these secret groups have carried this knowledge through time, and it's always been controversial because of, Da Vinci and others worried about being killed because they believed that, didn't believe everything the Catholic Church taught, so they had to be careful about how they put things. So I would say that one thing is that pyramid on there does seem to be sort of a revelation of saying, we can't say everything we believe, but there's something hidden here that's important.
You think that's why we have obelisks? Is it obelisks? Is that how it's pronounced? Obelisks.
Obelisk, yeah.
Yeah, around like in Western countries. Because I've always wondered. Because I was in Paris a few months ago and I saw them in there. I was like, why are they here? How have they got here?
Yeah.
What was the reason for having them up in Paris? They should be in
Egypt.
Egypt.
They were all taken from Egypt.
Mm.
They were all taken from Egypt.
Do you think they think there's some like hidden meaning or power behind it?
Well, it's probably like, yeah, it's like, showing that we can get the secrets to different places. I mean, that there's probably that the obelisk represents this hidden knowledge that's carried on by, the Rosicrucians, by, the sages. And Hemiunu, I think the architect of the Great Pyramid, was in that line. I think Da Vinci was in that line. I think Enoch was probably one of the first in that line. So it's the line of people to whom these secrets are, carried down with. So it's a way of saying we want to spread these secrets. And so by moving these obelisks to different places, and there's probably all kinds of different official reasons given. Oh, because, ancient Egyptian culture was such a powerful culture, and we want to have here in Central Park, a reminder of what a wonderful culture. I mean, there's probably stuff like that written, but I think they are, in a sense, saying we're gonna spread this message everywhere. We're gonna this is what's happening. Because it says Annuit Septus or something like that. He has conceived, and it says Novus Ordo Seclorum on there, a new world order. And so it's like, part of this esoteric teaching also has to do with bringing in a new world order. And so spreading obelisks to different nations would be a sort of symbol of, let's make that happen.
How long have you been researching Egypt and the pyramids for?
Well, when I went in 2011, or excuse me, 2014, that was the first time I actually went there. I had been studying probably the Egypt and the Great Pyramid for probably 30 years before that. But when I went in 2014, it was because tourism in Egypt was dead. The revolution in 2011, that just shut down. I mean, people that had hotels, cab drivers, everybody, their business was shot. They were gone. They were hungry. It was over. And so a tour company, Archaeological Pathways, made the attempt, okay, let's try and reopen tourism. And so in 2011, 2014, it was the first year basically a tour had been offered after the revolution. And we made the front page of the Cairo paper 2 times. I still have a copy of the story that says tourism is back, And so that 2014 is the first time I was there. But I tell you, I remember the night before I went to the Great Pyramid. The reason that I went on that was because I knew Zahi Hawass, he was the main speaker. He'd get me in anywhere we needed to go. If I'm going to go to Egypt, I don't want to try and get into the Great Pyramid, but not be able to get in. I knew going with him, I'd be able to. And I remember I was sleeping in the Mina house the night before I was going to enter the Great Pyramid, this building which I've studied for 30 years, and I couldn't sleep. I'm the kind of person that never has trouble sleeping. I can't commiserate with people that have trouble sleeping. I understand it can be a real problem when you can't, but but that one night I couldn't sleep because I knew the next day I was going to be going into the Great Pyramid. And when I went in there, I felt like I'd been in there before because I'd studied it so much, but it was still like a special feeling. So 2014 begins my on-ground adventure, but I had been, as a matter of fact, the reason I have the top level domain names, I have greatpyramid.org, I have greatpyramid.us, I have greatpyramid.info, I have great.pyramid-.com. The reason I have top level domain names is not because I bought them from somebody. I was studying Egypt at the infancy of the internet. I still remember when I first learned about the internet, and I knew that it was more powerful than the Gutenberg press. The moment I heard about the internet, I said, the world has changed. I knew it. And then I was an early adopter. And in the pages I put out about the Great Pyramid, I came up #1 in the world. This is long before Google. If you did a search on a computer anywhere, Great Pyramid, my page came up #1. So I was involved, with this from the beginning. Then I got into high school and college teaching, and I left that. And so by the time I got back in here later in life, the metrics, because of Google, the metrics of the internet had changed. And so now I don't have any special higher place than other people in terms of if you put in Great Pyramid, I'm lucky to come up on the first 10 pages, even though I still have all those top level domain names, because the algorithms they use now, especially after the Logan Paul incident, are based on solid. They want to first go with Harvard. They want to go with the Smithsonian. They want to go with the certified New York Times type channels, and all the independent channels got heavily degraded, at least in YouTube searches. And YouTube is the largest search engine other than Google. I mean, it's the. So, anyways, so decades, but on the ground since 10 years ago, 2014 to 2024.
What sort of initially got you into it? What was your like?
Yeah, I'll tell you what it was I was a student of prophecy. I read all the prophecies of Nostradamus. I read Edgar Cayce. I read the prophecies in the Bible. I actually wrote a book about Bible prophecy. So I was interested in prophecy. And somebody told me, well, the Great Pyramid is prophetic. I said, what? And that led me to study the Great Pyramid. So really what got me to the pyramid, and then it totally left really kind of my study of prophecy that gravitated me into Egypt, was believing that the Great Pyramid had prophetic value. And, it does, because if you go by it being the pillar of Enoch, so Enoch read all this knowledge, in a previous world, it was said that he was going to make a pillar that was going to do 2 things. It was going to show that they understood all the scientific and, astronomical and geometric knowledge of the old world, the ancient world would be there. And of course, the Great Pyramid does that. All this stuff is embedded in the Great Pyramid. But the second purpose of the pillar of Enoch was going to be prophecies of catastrophes to come. And so I've been trying to figure out the precessional clock that's at Giza. And Robert Grant's been getting in this too, and what he's finding out in the King's Chamber, that the whole zodiac is up there. And if the zodiac is there, that's related to time. And then we're going to start being able to tell where we are in time and what's going to happen. And so I think that that second purpose is really, I guess, one of the things still keeping me in searching for all these ancient secrets at Giza is because of this idea going back to, like you asked me there, Aaron, about what got me into it was prophecy, believing that a lot of these marks that they left are prophetic. For instance, when I found there's a major gash on the Giza Plateau that's at 23, and a half degrees. That's the tilt angle of planet Earth. And it touches between two of the largest monuments on each side. It's plainly revealed there. So they're talking about the first tilt. I think that there's a warning of another tilt, and the major catastrophes that happen when the Earth suddenly, tilts on its axis. There's major tsunamis and all kinds of other things. So I do think that could be there, hidden away. I'm sure, as a matter of fact, I'm really sure it's there. I just haven't figured it out yet.
The more we research Egypt and the more things we discover there, the closer we're going to get to finding out more about human origins.
I think so. I think so. Yeah, because plainly there's this, uh, Aboriginal revelation that's there. Plainly, that even though the Egyptologists say coincidence or say no, they're wrong. It plainly is there. So the question comes, as you're pointing out, interpreting how it got there. And that to me, that's I'm not even sure that's the major battleground or everything, as I've thought this through, because it doesn't, in a sense, it doesn't matter where it came from. I guess it does, because as you said, the intellectual curiosity, and we want to know, and so it's important that way. But it's almost like, well, what does it matter? It's once we find these things now, what does it mean? Like somebody asked me on Instagram yesterday, why is the speed of light all over the place? And it is, because if you followed my recent things, I've discovered I was at the Tomb of the Birds the last time I was there, which has been closed for 15 years, and it's the entrance to the underground. It's the entrance to those tunnels underneath Giza. And just do a search for Andrew Collins and Tomb of the Birds, and he and his wife found it. And they're walking in there. It just smells of the bat dung that was there, and spiders and snakes, and they could only make it so far without getting suffocated. But they plainly found at the Tomb of the Birds it was the entrance to the underground. And when they published that, Zahi Hawass, who was at that time the head of the Supreme Council of Antiquities, he put iron bars over the entrance to the Tomb of the Birds. And so for the past 15 years, those iron bars have been there. Well, I went there, not too many months ago. They were off. Like I don't know if I lucked out or what, but I walked in, I was in the Tomb of the Birds. Okay. So that led me to want to study the Tomb of the Birds more. Well, the Tomb of the Birds, let me share the screen real quick just to show this. I could talk about it and I think you could understand it, but uh, let's see. That's the altar in the Tomb of the Birds, that right there. That's me. You can see my shadow and you can see me taking that. Here I am. This is inside the Tomb of the Birds. This is me. I'm talking. That's the entrance that I came in that was unlocked. So, just to show you, so that I measured that space right there. You can see the measurements. I measured that little inset right there. And so I found that is the length is 3.5 feet. The width is 0.584 because I had a laser measure, so I could measure that exactly. And so the depth is whatever it says there. And then so the volume is 1.618 feet cubed. Phi. 1.618 phi, and it's in feet cubed. Wow. That's 5 feet cubed. Okay. And so I'm saying message. We know the foot and we know phi. Okay. And then for the whole thing there, it's 5.44 feet and pi, 3.14 feet. Interesting. That's pi. So you divide those two and it equals 1.732, which is a square root of 3. So now they're showing in the size of this altar here, square root of 3, which to me says, square root of 2 is planning something. You're on 2D space, and because square root of 2 is the diagonal of a 1x1 square. So if you have a 1x1 square on a flat plane, but if you take a cube, now you make it three-dimensional, that diagonal is root 3. So 3 says to me, take something two-dimensional and make it three-dimensional. Take your plans and make them real. Go from planning to doing. That's what root 3 is, okay? So where does the Tomb of the Birds fit at Giza? Okay, so here's, Gary Osborne's work at Giza, very elaborate. So Okay, the holy shaft is connected to everything. So yeah, I guess I need to go. I'm showing something. I need to cut to the chase here and get to where the Tomb of the Birds actually is here. Let's see where I've got it here. Yeah, that's not it. Okay, yeah, this looks like, well, here's one thing I found right here. Okay, so the holy shaft there, okay, the Great Sphinx, which you can see pictured there, is exactly 300 meters from the holy shaft. I couldn't believe it was exactly 300 meters. And then what I found was on the left there, that's a boss that I found at the bottom of the holy shaft. It's like it doesn't need to be there. It's stuck out, and that's what's on this chest of the Sphinx. Look at the right picture there. Look over here. They're those two, and they're facing in opposite directions. You've got this boss in the holy shaft and this boss on the front of the Sphinx, which is not related to the anatomy of a pharaoh. It's not related to the anatomy of a lion. It's this boss, just like the boss there, exactly 300 meters apart. The holy shaft boss to the Sphinx boss is exactly. Now look at this. Google Earth showing the distance from the Tomb of the Birds to the Great Pyramid. There's the Tomb of the Birds on the left. There's the Great Pyramid right there. The distance is 749.48 meters. So what? Okay, look at this. There's that distance. Okay, so make a diameter out of that. Double it. 749 times 48. The whole diameter is 1.49896 kilometers. So what? Double that, and you got the speed of light. So go back and forth, and you have the speed of light. Okay, back and forth, you have the speed of light. So that's unbelievable. Why? Because you again, just showing this, doubled, it's 2997.92. Well, the speed of light is 299,792 kilometers per second. So here's the thing. By having it go back and forth, it's saying this. Today, the speed of light has never been measured. Well, how do we know it? Because we measure the two-way speed of light. We bounce it off something and measure it when it comes back. We don't have clocks sophisticated enough to be able to time it to measure the one-way speed of light. So all measurements we have of the speed of light are bouncing it back. That's what this is saying. It's showing the speed of light. You've got to go across the diameter and back, and then you've got the speed of light. They're saying not only do we know the speed of light, but we understand the physical limitation that you can't measure the one-way speed of light. And then it goes on from there. I mean, it goes on. There's even more I could show you here from stuff I've discovered based on that. Because I was in the Tomb of the Birds, I thought I should study it. And it's plain. Okay, another thing I didn't show you there. So I showed you the Tomb of the Birds. I showed you the Great Pyramid. So it's on the same line as the center of the Great Pyramid, by the way. It's not just like up or down. It's exactly where the center of the Great Pyramid is. Well, Hemiunu's tomb, the architect of the Great Pyramid, the southern part of his tomb is on that exact same line. That can't be by chance. And I found out it's exactly at the 5 proportion. If you take the distance from the Tomb of the Birds to Hemiunu's tomb and call that 1, then the distance from Hemiunu's tomb to the Great Pyramid is 0.618. So plainly, Hemiunu is saying, this goes back to the thing we discussed at the very beginning of the podcast here. He's laying it out in such a way to saying, look, there's human device going on here. We planned where these things were put. The Tomb of the Birds and the Great Pyramid, which I designed, I'm putting my tomb exactly at the 5 proportion between them, just in case there was any questions, Egyptologists, about what we're doing here. So it's amazing.
That's mind-blowing.
It's amazing. It's absolutely mind-blowing. It is.
Mm. So what is the Tomb of the Birds?
Well, it's a tomb like other tombs, but it really does have the entrance to the underworld. I didn't go into it because I was alone. I didn't have very good lighting, and I thought I know my phone's doesn't work in there. If I break a leg or something, because there are deep pits and stuff, and I'd be there, and who knows if they'll lock that gate again or not know I'm even in there. I won't be able to call for help. So, okay, between you and me and the deep blue sea, when I go back in March and what I call my March adventure, we're going to go there. I'm going to make all the people that go with me because it's not one of my tours like a 5-star tour floating down the Nile. This is a research tour, and everybody's going to sign a statement. I understand we might never get to the Tomb of the Birds. We understand you can't guarantee, but we're going to go there, and we're going to go there with the idea of doing more than I did.
Are you going to film it?
What's that?
You're going to film it?
Oh, yeah, we're going to film it. But the thing is, that's if we get there, because again, I don't have permission to go there. I'll never get permission. I talked with, well, I don't want to tell the stories, but I'm not Harvard or, I'm not the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. I'm not the Oriental Institute. I'm an independent researcher. They're never going to get me permission to do it. So if I do it, it's going to be sneaking in. And the thing is, I wouldn't sneak in if there was a big sign that said no trespassing. I wouldn't do it. I really wouldn't, because then I could be arrested, thrown in jail, and deported or whatever. I go there because there's no sign that says don't come here. And I know, and the thing, my thinking is that the fact that they left the door open, they probably have blocked the entrance to the underworld, because I didn't really try and go. It was too dark back there, because I know where that entrance is. It's off to the west of where I showed you the altar, the measurements of the altar there. It's west of there. It was dark in that room, and I wasn't about to go in there and fall to my death or something, but that with a group of people in a good light, we might go explore there, but that's between you and me and the deep blue seas.
Yeah, yeah. Do you know these ancient structures? They've obviously gone through some sort of they've gone to some extent to preserve these. They've gone to, I mean, for how long they've been there, and for them to be in the sort of condition they're in now is kind of mind blowing in itself. Why do you think they've went through the measures they did to preserve them to such a degree that they have done?
Well, I think the first thing in that regard is that the people that built them, they could have, let's say it was Atlantis, okay? If they had the technology they supposedly had, they could have left us a little crystal that had all the knowledge, had a computer chip in it, and everything that's in the Great Pyramid times 100 is on that chip. That's not what they left us. They didn't leave us a space age, because when we put men on the moon, they left. I don't know if you can study about what they left up there. They left a coin up there that had stuff. So they left us a big, like, old-fashioned kind of stone monument, because it would last. It would encase those secrets. And so they chose to do it that way, not by leaving a little crystal chip, like, okay, left us all the clues, and then we dig this thing up, we open this chest, and in this chest is a little computer chip, and we somehow figure out how to extract it. No, that's not what they did. So that says to me they were good builders, whoever they were. Good because they designed the building to encode phi and pi and Euler and the speed of light. And by the way, I mentioned the speed of light. Let me say I'm very happy to announce that I had a paper accepted by a scientific journal, Archaeological Discovery, and my paper that was accepted, but I have got to finish the diagrams and stuff, is about how the speed of light is revealed in the chambers of the Great Pyramid. And I will be so super excited to see that in a scientific journal, because I thought it was never possible. I didn't think it was possible, but I went ahead and did it. I put it on academia. It put me among the top 2% of papers in academia. All the people that looked at it, I had a lot of feedback on the paper. But then I thought, this is science. First of all, I'm measuring things. That's science. Secondly, it's the Great Pyramid. That's archaeology. That's science. What's unscientific about what I'm doing? There's nothing. I'm simply measuring the Great Pyramid. It's in the interpretation saying, oh, look, the numbers of the speed of light are right here. Now that's my conclusion. They can publish the paper and not agree with my conclusion, because everything I said is scientific. It is a scientific fact that these numbers are the same as the numbers in the speed of light. Okay, that could be coincidence. Okay. So anyways, I'm very happy to say that I'll, once I go through the work, which I should have been working on, but I did this podcast with you, they're asking me the pictures I sent, the diagrams are not high resolution enough for the journal. So it's a lot of work to fix them, and I'm kind of avoiding it. But I want to get it in there because it's been accepted. I want to get it in there for to have in a scientific journal an article that talks about that. But so whether it comes from Atlantis or from what I think, Egyptians who got revelations from sages before them. So the Egyptians were the builders. I do think that. I think there's a lot of powerful archaeological evidence that says the Egyptians were the builders. I'm simply saying that the architects, Hemiunu, was one of the adepts. He was one of the ones who, just like the dollar bill, he was one of the ones in the line that we know what's going on. So Hemiunu was an Egyptian, but he was in the line of the sages. So he built into the Great Pyramid, which was built by Egyptians. these constants from the ancient past. So that's my explanation, and that's really what I believe, and I really believe that's the true answer. And so people disagree. They think that the structures, as your question implied, they think the structures are older, like Dr. Schock on the geology of the Sphinx. But Dr. Schock is the only geologist that says that. There's a whole bunch of other very astute geologists who give a completely different explanation for the stones of the Sphinx. So Dr. Schock's work is not a slam dunk to show that the Sphinx is older. It really isn't. And I happen to know somebody that gave him $1 million, and the person that gave him $1 million totally believes it's much older.
How do you believe the Egyptians built the pyramids?
That is the greatest mystery. The fact that, because I do think that the evidence is pretty profound, and that they did build it. But the fact that we don't know how, that's amazing. I've been working with an engineer for years, and we've come up with so many different theories based on the evidence that we find there, based on things we find there. Jean-Pierre Houdin, the famous architect from France, from an architectural family, spent years, and his books, I could pull up his books off the shelf right here. He's the one that says there was an internal staircase. And some of the stuff that's been found recently leads him to think that, he's really right. That's why there's not the external staircases, because they use the internal staircase. And I've worked with that, and I've worked with water elevators, which I think were very possible. A water elevator in the middle of the Great Pyramid that moved blocks up. I don't think it was levitation. I don't think it was sound. Because if why don't we do that now? Why don't we build skyscrapers with levitation and with a sound? We don't. And I just don't think. Well, that might be theoretically possible. I don't think they did that. I don't think they were. I just don't think they did. There's no evidence that they did. And, it wasn't poured blocks. That's ridiculous. Davidovitz, that's just ridiculous. There just isn't the evidence for poured blocks. And it would be much harder to pour the blocks than to just cut them in the quarry and take them up there. It really would. It would be easier just to cut the blocks in the quarry, because the Giza is in a quarry. It is a quarry. Just cut the blocks there and move them in. That's easier than pouring it, moving. I used to mix mortar for a living. As a young man, I was the first guy on the job. I'd, take the spark plug out of the mixer. I'd put a match on it to help it start. I get the mixer, and then I had to have all the mortar boards filled by the time all the guys came on the job. I understand about what mixing mortar is and putting it in. The idea that, pouring these stones explains something. No, it doesn't. It explains how in the heck did you do all that? I know how hard it is to lift mortar when guys are working up on a third story and I'm mixing mortar on the ground and I got to get mortar up to the third story. Trust me, I know how hard that is. Okay. So I did poured. No, then there's not the evidence for their reports. So they weren't poured. Plus, you've got the oldest papyrus found, the Red Sea scrolls, the ones that were found by the ship captain Marar, who was taking the Tura limestone to the Great Pyramid. And we know that the outer casing of the Great Pyramid wasn't taken from Giza limestone. It was taken from Tura, which was down the Nile a bit. And we have all the records of the crews that did that. And they were totally Egyptians. It was totally Fourth Dynasty, and it was totally the finishing part of the Great Pyramid. So when some people say, well, the Egyptians came upon another structure that was already there and they kind of slapped their name on it, let's think of what slapping their name on it means. If you placed the casing stones, the 145,000 highly polished Tura limestone casing stones on there, that's as amazing as building the pyramid. So if all the Egyptians did was put on the final casing stones, they might as well have built the whole thing. Because just if you study, and again, we have all the records that they did that. So but to me, it's still, the question is, okay, these sages carried down phi and pi and the speed of light. Why? Whether it was Atlantis or whether it was Enoch, I still want to know what it means. So in my book about the Sphinx, let me just grab that. I just had somebody, if you look at one of my stories today on Instagram, somebody said, this book, changed his life. This is a way of living. Well, it's called The Song of the Sphinx. The Song of the Sphinx, that's my book. And in there, I have chapters at the end about the constants, phi, pi. Like, why? What do those mean? Because I'm suggesting that it's okay. It's not just they're showing off. Oh, look, we knew the speed of light. Oh, look, we knew phi. No, that's not what they're doing. They're above that kind of, we know something you don't know. They're characters above that. They're showing they knew it. That's a small thing. The question is, what does it mean? And that's what I'm getting into. So whether it's from Atlantis or whether it's from Enoch, because they're both carrying the same revelation, It's what does it mean? I one time started a talk. I spoke at the fourth annual the Global Pyramid Network Conference. I also spoke at the fifth one, which was last September. But the year before, I was speaking about the Sphinx. I was speaking about my book. And I started out by saying this, look, I'm not going to talk. I'm not going to give the rest of my talk unless some of you from the audience raise your hand and tell me, what do you think would have been in the Hall of Records? So Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, had this dream that there was the Hall of Records underneath the Sphinx, and all these esoteric people, Mark Lehner included, when he first went to Egypt as a young man, are looking for the Hall of Records that's underneath the Sphinx. And of course, Robert Schoch and Thomas de Beckley have found this anomaly that their radar shows is under the Sphinx. So, okay, so I said, before I go on, tell me what you think would have been in the Hall of Records. Because it's so powerful, it's so wonderful. So tell me what you think it was. Okay, and I'm done. The talk's done until I hear from you. And I sat back because I was just I would have just walked off the stage if after 10 minutes nobody. But then slowly the answers started to come. Well, it could be the plans for the machines that the Atlanteans have. Okay, it could be the real history of the universe. Okay, good. So people started saying what they thought was in the Hall of Records. I'm telling you, it's in plain sight. There is no Hall of Records. The best book on the Sphinx written in recent times is better than the Temple book is Manu Safsida wrote Under the Sphinx. This is the first major study of the Sphinx done in a while. And he shows from the Coptic records that the archive that was under the Sphinx has been breached and moving, so it's not there. Edgar Cayce said it would be found by the year 2000. He was wrong. It hasn't been. And Manu Safsida says if it was paper, it's waterlogged under the Sphinx, so the parchment would have been ruined. If it was metal plates, they would have been ruined because they'd be all rusted. So I'm saying you don't need to find the Hall of Records. It's in plain sight. It's in plain sight. The Sphinx reveals what's there. It's in plain sight. So, I'm doing a thing now. I used to not sell my book. I just gave it to my tourists and people that supported me. It's like, this is a holy book, and I'm not just going to put it to Amazon on for money. So you give me a certain amount of money and I give you the book. No. And I still do that. It's on my website, but I don't sell it to you until you still correspond me and tell me why you want it and what you're interested in. So it's holy knowledge, and I don't give it to just anybody. It's, don't cast what is holy before dogs, an Eastern master said, So yeah, you got to pay money to get it, but that's not enough. You have to convince me I should send it to you. So that might sound stupid. I might be you can say I'm a big idiot. Say what you want to say.
Oh, I respect
It's not
that.
yours. It's not yours until you talk to me, okay? And somebody, if you look at my story on Instagram today, they did a story about me, and so I just took their story and made it mine. But you see right on there that it says something about, I forgot what it says. It's very complimentary. And they told me privately, in texting me, that it gave them a new way to look at living. So, well, listen, that's probably a good place to wrap up here. What do you think? Because I've got to be leaving here pretty soon. So
Yeah, you've got your tennis. But I just want to say, when we discussed, I guess, midpoint about the two different sort of sides of the industry, where you've got the alternative viewpoint, then you've got the mainstream viewpoint. And we also touched on there's a new generation of people that are coming out of the industry that are going to do some crazy things. I will just, from our conversation today, I've realized that you are one of the people in this new generation that are going to be able to change things, and you're not going down one side or the other. You're not going down the mainstream side. You're not going down the alternative side. You're taking a bit of both, and then going there yourself and saying, well, you're saying this, you're saying this. Let's actually just look at it, what's there, and let's account for what's there. So what you're actually doing is very, very powerful, because you've got the alternative views who are just sort of, a lot of them are creating theories, and a lot of it, like the Atlantis stuff, it's exciting because it's mythology, right? Oh my God, this might have existed. This is crazy. And you get a sort of excitement from there. Whereas you're going there without that view and saying, this is what's actually there on the ground right in front of our eyes. And I just think that's a much more powerful way of going about it than what I've seen most people, the angle that most people take. So keep doing
well,
what
I
you're doing.
appreciate that, Cam, because that is the way that I flatter myself that I do. we're all subject. We all have a blind spot. We're all prideful in our own ways. I understand that. That's the human condition. I believe that. But insofar as possible with me, I try. I'm an honest. I can show that I haven't done things for money. Because some people do. My credentials are. I'm not doing this for money, and I'm not doing it for fame. I got a small YouTube channel. I'm not. Some people know me, but it's not. I'm proud, and I'm a bad publicist. What I am is I'm a seeker for truth. I went after my life changed around and I went back to one of the first weddings of my high school friends, and I was sitting at the bar with the kid in my class that was voted most likely to succeed. And he said to me, Larry, you've been searching for something all your life, and I can tell you found it. So here's the guy voted most likely to succeed, characterizing his friendship with me in high school, saying you were always searching for something. So my credentials in order to say is I'm known as a searcher. I have been a searcher. I'm an honest searcher. And so I appreciate your characterization of me, Cam, because yes, I've been with Hawass. I've been with Mark Lehner. I've been with Robert Grant. I was his main teacher. I read both sides, and I go to the plateau and find what I find. And so I listen to anything. I try and be rational, but I don't agree with everything, but I try and listen to everything.
You at least acknowledge it's there and it is a theory that someone's put out there. That's the amazing thing. You acknowledge that these theories have been put out there, and then go there and check it out for yourself and see what you can back up, like physically can back up, and what you can't.
Which I honestly think in today's age is such a rare trait to have that ability. A lot of people are blindsided by their own ideologies and own way of seeing the world. It's an amazing trait to have, where you can look at other theories and look at other people's opinions and take it on board.
Well, when I lived in a foreign country for a year, and the reason I moved there is so my kids, my young sons, would be exposed to a different culture, and they learned the language, and they've thanked me since then. So when you're put in a situation where you're in a completely different set of mores and thoughts and a different language, that's good for a young kid. It's good for anybody. It's good to shake things up and realize. And so when they came home, to the States, they went through reverse culture shock, and that's good. That's good for a young person to realize there's more in the world. And I think that's one of the greatest things I did in life, was to have my sons, give them the gift of a foreign language and the gift of a different culture at a young age, to put things in perspective for the rest of their life, So I believe in that. I believe in what you said there, Aaron. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. This has been great, Larry. Thank you so much for
well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And let me know what you're going to do with it when it comes out. And let me just say to anybody that might be watching this, I'm not sure when it'll come out, but look at my website, greatpyramid.org. Just one word, Great Pyramid. Just think of the Great Pyramid and then that, because I'm a not-for-profit organization in Tennessee. So .org is the correct, ending. So it's greatpyramid.org. And you'll see the various offerings I have for March. I've got an adventure I've never done before, and I don't know that anybody's ever done. There are 7 mysterious mid-sized step pyramids in Egypt that are all along the Nile. There's hardly anything written about any one of them. I'm going to take a group of people to study the 7 mysterious mid-sized step pyramids in Egypt. And secondly, I'm going to do this March adventure where we're going to go to the Tomb of the Birds, the Mysterious Staircase, and some other places off the beaten path. It's the most inexpensive tour I do, because it's not a tour. It's an adventure. It's all inclusive. We live simple, we eat simple, and we do the magic. So check out the website, greatpyramid.org. There's still room. Come on with me.
Cool. I'll leave a link to it all in the episode notes as well, so people can just easily navigate over to it. Yeah, thank you for coming on, and good luck with everything. Good luck with your.
Okay, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Cheers, Larry. Yeah, keep up the hard work.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you later.
Bye.